the reason why they become bad and bad to the community is because they need to struggle what they need. So when police hassle us, give us bad time and say because we did bad stuff, is because we can't support ourselves.
Young people cited the criminalization of being homeless as exacerbating their instability by keeping them on the move and making it that much harder for them to find stable housing. In Los Angeles, every single one of the youth in the focus group that we held there had been ticketed for a quality of life offense. And the great majority, needless to say, did not pay these tickets because, as they pointed out, we're homeless. We don't have money to pay the tickets. And that often eventually led to garnishment of wages and often arrest.
I was working at Citibank. I had a bank account with Washington Mutual. I had like, I don't know, like over $900 saved up. I was like really going for my apartment. And, you know, pretty much, you know, sleeping on the streets and stuff, you know, I mean, I kept on getting these tickets. Now, I can't pay these tickets because I'm trying to save my money. It's like $250 tickets. Now, the courts, they decided to send it to collections. And the collection, they start meddling in all your stuff and find out where all your money is. They got into my bank account and garnished all my wages.
According to some research by the National Coalition for the Homeless over the past couple of decades, the trend has been towards using the criminal justice system and away from using systems such as mental health and social service.
A lot of people think being homeless is a crime when in reality, it's not. It's something that just happens, I guess.
Something that could be changed in the politics of dealing with homeless youth is a lot of police treat homeless kids like they're criminals and they're delinquents, and they're not really. Most of the time, it's not really their fault that they ended up where they are. They're just a victim of circumstance, and I feel like a lot of the police should be trained not to treat these kids like criminals, but to treat them like people that have been used and abused.
Our second recommendation. Undo the criminalization of homelessness.
Because we get a lot of training on how to deal with the criminals. We don't get a lot of training on how to be compassionate and empathetic to the situations that we run into with the juveniles on the street as first responders. It disturbed me that that's how we're being perceived. And when I read that, I looked back and says that has to be our communication skills.
And they're not really a help. Like, I think they could be helpful, like if they knew about the resources and they knew places for like the homeless to go, instead of just going to the homeless and saying, get off the street, or if I see you out here again, I'm gonna arrest you.
When the pimp that had kidnapped me was pulled over and I was taken out of the car, the back of the pimp's car, and put in the back of a police car, handcuffed, arrested, and taken to juvenile hall. Nobody asked me what had happened to me over those 10 days. When I got taken to juvenile hall, that police officer that arrested me assumed because I had a record that I was a criminal. And I spent the next 30 days suffering.
Build a communication with the child, find out what the problem is, and then you can find a solution to stop the runaway cycle.
Our third recommendation. Train police to communicate effectively with young people in crisis on the streets.
And then right when I'm released, I'm on the streets, you know. I have nowhere else to go. I end up downtown of all places. So right now we're on Wall and 5th, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty much this is pretty much where a lot of the cops drop off, you know, a lot of the older homeless people. But a lot of homeless youth don't hang out down here. Just because it's just really dangerous.
Interestingly, although there's a very high level of victimization among youth on the street, not a single young person out of 200 plus that we surveyed reported ever turning to the police for help.
I've gotten, I don't know, like 3 sleeping bags stolen from me since I've been on the streets.
We should call the police department, but we don't because we're like, we already know who's going to come out, we already know what division is going to come out, and we're drug addicts, we're dope dealers, we're prostitutes. We have no right.
Our fourth recommendation. Make it safe for homeless or criminally involved youth to turn to the police for help so they can end the cycle. Undo the criminalization of homelessness. Train police to communicate effectively with young people in crisis on the streets. Make it safe for homeless or criminally involved youth to turn to the police for help so they can end the cycle.
This is my criminal court, and that's my public defendant. And this is my school record. As you see, I think I'm a good student. I think I have a ability to be successful, but it's just that I make the wrong choice. My school stuff for psychology, sociology, and speech.
Over 90% of the youth surveyed had a specific career goal and made it clear that they saw education as their way out of homelessness at the same time that their homelessness is a barrier to their education.
One young man in our group was talking about he was getting in fights all the time. He was actually getting good grades, but he kept getting expelled for fights, and he was getting in fights because he was under so much stress because of the instability of his housing with his mom. You're moving from school to school to school. You don't have a solid friend base. You're very insecure in your peer environment, and that also impacts both your performance in school and in class and out of class at school.
Because of the mobility that happens when youth are homeless, they have big issues with credits. Particularly high school students have big issues with credits because they might get a few credits from another place, but the place they're at now doesn't want to accept those credits. And I don't know if anybody in this room would show up at work and do your work all day long if you knew you weren't going to get paid. So I don't know why we expect teenagers to show up at school and go to school all day long even though they're not going to get credit.
I tried that role for my senior year.
I had San Jose High Academy, and what happened, the counselor over there, he looked over my credits, and he told me because of my age at the time, I was 18, barely turned 19. At that time, I was only about 48 credits away from graduation. And what happened with that, he said, San Jose High doesn't accept no fifth-year seniors just because of my age.
We had kids that were just hanging around and weren't going to school. And while, the school said they had systems, one of the nice ways of dealing with homeless kids is to put them on independent study, which is often called home study, which is really a cute way when you're saying to a kid that doesn't have a home, oh, you can go home and do your school at home.
The McKinney-Vento Act was passed in 1987, and it was part of a very large federal law meant to deal with a lot of different areas of homelessness. And there was one small part of that law that was meant to deal with education. It's designed to give schools the flexibility to make sure that children and youth who are experiencing homelessness can enroll in school, that they can get there every day, and that they can have the support they need to succeed and to meet their goals.
Our fifth recommendation. Fully implement the McKinney-Vento Act so homeless students get support to stay in school, such as credit transfer programs and resources such as lockers, showers, and transportation vouchers.
When we've gone to these schools to get access to them and have said, your school has 240 homeless youth and we'd like the lists, and we hear it's the reason why and this is the sort of thing, more often than not, the response we found was, really? We have 240 homeless youth in our school? Wow, I didn't know that.
I think a good point is homeless children don't want to be recognized. I know I didn't. I just kind of sat there in the background. Nobody really wants to go up to anybody and say, I'm homeless.
Sharday did not want to go to school, and one of the reasons she didn't want to go to school is because she wasn't able to take a shower in the morning. And it's kind of like one of those things where you go, duh. I mean, if I couldn't take a shower in the morning, I wouldn't want to go out of the house.
Our sixth recommendation. Be aware of the stigma and barriers that discourage homeless youth from asking for help or attending school.
Very few of them said anything specific to school in answer to the question, what kind of support would you need to stay in school? What they needed to stay in school was what they needed, period. You can't solve the educational problems of homeless youth and still leave them on the street.
Fully implement the McKinney-Vento Act so homeless students get support to stay in school, such as credit transfer programs and resources such as lockers, showers, and transportation vouchers. Be aware of the stigma and barriers that discourage homeless youth from asking for help or attending school.